Now, you've probably noticed that, for better or worse, I am not Academy Award winner Nicolas Cage playing Randall Memphis Reigns in Gone in 60 Seconds. But what's rather trickier to spot is that this is not the original 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500 named Eleanor from that same film.
This is Eleanor Gone Again.
There have been numerous replicas, tributes and interpretations over the years, but this is a bit special.
What makes this one so cool is the fact that it's been made by the very same people that made all the film cars. So they know every single detail as it should be.
It also means that each one of these 25 continuation cars will come with a different piece of fun film memorabilia. This episode is driven by Hagerty, who, in case you don't know, provide car insurance that's designed by drivers for drivers. So if you have a special car that you don't drive every day, like one of these perhaps, then take a trip to hagerty.com/Henry or pick up the phone, give them a call and speak to a like-minded enthusiast about a quote.
Go back to some. What were the first ones that you did?
Cinema. The first notable cars I think we did wouldn't be notable cars, but the bigger movies that we worked on back in those days would have been like Die Hards and Lethal Weapons, stuff like that became notable. The first TV series that we did that I remember were stuff like Fall Guy. This is probably going back before a lot of you guys were born. Fall Guy, and then of course Dukes of Hazzard came along a few years later, and that was probably one of the cars that was more identifiable, to the general public.
This is Ray Claridge, who in the 1970s set up Cinema Vehicle Services, now known as Cinema Muscle Recreations. Everything from Herbie the Love Bug to Austin Powers' Shaguar to Transport for the Terminator has been through his workshop. Randy Wolf, who now owns the company, and Sam, who has worked here for decades, are also full of stories. Like this one, about the Fast and the Furious.
We were building all those Chargers, and we were, at the time, was it Chuck Taylor? I think he had these racing blown Hemis, and he ended up renting us one. So we actually that barn scene, it's actually a rented motor where they're dropping it in the car, because we were building those. I can't remember what motors they had, whatever we put in them at the time, but we had cut those blowers and mounted them to the bottom of the hood and did little like choke cables for the buzzard catchers, so when he'd get on it, we put fake belts and look good on camera.
But back to Gone in 60 Seconds, which, in case you don't know, was a remake of the 1974 original that had a 40-minute car chase and used a 1973 Mustang as Eleanor.
Jesus Christ, he just hit a damn post.
I was thinking about why Gone in 60 Seconds is such a loved film by the viewing public. I mean, the critics didn't like it. It was no surprise. And I think everybody can admit that there's a lot of cheesiness in there. But it is a film that people like because when you think back to 2000, there was no YouTube, obviously. And finding car content, it wasn't easy. The Fast and Furious franchise didn't come about till a year later in 2001. And so for an audience to see all those cars, a lot of them quite niche, it was a big thing. It was exciting. It means you can look past plot lines and things because it's just fun seeing all those cars on the big screen.
Or maybe I've got it all wrong, and it was just Vinnie Jones and a bleach blonde Angelina Jolie that ensured its success. But somehow I think not.
So tell me, how did the Gone in 60 Seconds project come about?
Well, it started out as really not, I hate to say it, just another movie. It's going to be just another movie, We work primarily with the transportation coordinators in town. In this particular case, the transportation coordinator's name was Bryce Williams. And he called me, he said, I've got this movie. It's very car heavy, very car centric. I want you to help me with it. I said, well, certainly, So he brought over a script, and we went through it, broke it down a little bit, and I went, yeah, it's very car heavy, you know. And he says, well, we've got this one car in it. It's the main focus of the script, the storyline. It's called Eleanor. They named all the cars in the movie, the 50 cars they had to steal. So we started breaking down. I said, well, what is the car? He said, we don't know yet.
Eleanor wasn't actually always going to be a Mustang. Originally, the producers wanted it to be a different Ford, a GT40.
At least that's what I'd read on the internet.
Because is it true that originally Eleanor, they wanted to be a GT40?
No. To my understanding, no. My understanding, the art director initially wanted a Corvette.
Okay.
But because of the script, before it ever got to me, before the script, they decided against that because of all the body damage that would be done and stuff, and you know, having to deal with a fiberglass body, and they realized they were going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But that's the only other car I've ever heard mentioned that they were talking about.
How many cars did you end up producing for the film, and what happened to them afterwards? Were they all mostly destroyed, or?
In essence, in the very beginning, we had to build a prototype for Jerry Bruckheimer, the producer, to sign off on. Mm-hmm. So we built the prototype, we really slammed it together. We did it in a week, which seemed unconscionably quick, and it was, but we did it. And it was a decent looking car. Didn't have any of the refinements of the later ones, obviously. No interior whatsoever. So we blacked out the windows. So that car wound up never being in the movie. We wound up parking it over in a corner, and it wound up getting sold later on to a museum back in Tennessee, I believe it is. Just the way it was. And then we actually built 11 production cars for the production. I know the number's been bandied around left and right about how many cars there were, but there were 11 cars built for the production that were actually filmed. 7 of those survived production. 4 of them were totaled out. Although in hindsight, if I'd known what they'd become worth, I would have found a way to save every one of them. But at that time, it was another movie. It hadn't even been released yet.
Yeah.
You know, it was just another movie. So the 7 cars that made it through, they have all found private homes. They're all in private collections right now.
And some of those cars must be like the ship of Theseus, or Trigger's broom, depending if you're more Plutarch or Peckham. And now, 25 years later, there are going to be some more Eleanors, built by the same people, with a certificate of authenticity, and each costing around $500,000. But just like the originals, they won't all be exactly the same under the skin.
For the 25 continuation cars, there will be 3 engine options. So if you want to be traditional, go with what's in the film, you can have a Roush 427. But if you want something a little bit more modern, then you can have a Coyote engine, either in naturally aspirated form or, like this car, the full-on supercharged version.
It's a VMP 3-litre twin-screw supercharger which bumps power up from just under 500 brake horsepower with the naturally aspirated engine to a massive 830 bhp.
That is wild. What's it like to drive? Obviously it's dominated by the engine, but given that when I heard it had 660 pounds-feet of torque and it's an old Mustang, and I thought, well, surely that's just going to fold like a bad hand at poker. Actually, it drives incredibly well. And then you see everything underneath, all the reinforcement that's gone on. You see the four-link rear suspension, and you understand why it drives actually as well as it does. No, it's not really a car for sort of ripping up and down canyons still, I wouldn't say. But it's good fun on a road like this that's a bit more wide and flowing. I mean, this is not the route to the docks that Nicolas Cage took, but it's fun to come out here rather than just driving around town posing. I love these Coyote engines. I just think they're brilliant. I've driven them in a few different cars now, and without exception, they've been so much fun to drive. They feel all at once modern, easy to drive, big-chested, they sound fabulous in seemingly whatever installation they have. And they have the character that you just don't think a modern V8 is necessarily going to possess. But these Coyote engines, I think they're everything you want, really.
Although the supercharger generally makes it more drivable than a turbocharger, there is nonetheless a sizable and sometimes surprising kick at just over 3,000 RPM.
It seems to switch from Care Bear to Grizzly Bear without anything in between. You feel like you only need to rev it to about 4, but when you take it all the way to 6, 7.5 is actually when it's red like that. It's just wild. That's only 4. What's interesting as well is that I wouldn't say this is exactly my favourite looking Mustang, but you forgive it so much because it's what you want to see. You want to see the car that was on the screen. You want to drive in something that makes you feel, I suppose, a little bit like Nicolas Cage. You need to feel that authenticity. It needs to be exactly what was on the big screen. In the same way that if you were driving around in something that had the number plate BMT 216A or Ecto 1 or Out of Time, you want it to be as close to what's on screen as possible.
And authenticity might mean having some slightly strange bits of bodywork.
Take, for example, the side scoops, Exhibit A and Exhibit B, which are very clearly fake. I can put my fingers in there, and therefore unforgivable on any other car. But on this, somehow absolutely fine, because that's what was on the film cars.
The details continue on the inside too.
If somebody glanced in here without knowing what they were looking at, they would probably see this and think, what is that monstrosity doing there, blocking your view of the fuel gauge? But of course, it wouldn't be right without it, because it was in the film car. And there are all sorts of other little touches as well. They're very distinctive wide pedals for brake and clutch, the nitrous switch down here, and of course the pièce de résistance, go baby go.
Randy has got some cool ideas about just what that button might do in these continuation cars, but regardless, the lever it's attached to is entertainment enough.
The other thing I love about the drivetrain in this car is the gearbox. This Tremec 6-speed, which is often mated to the Coyote engine, and it's just such a nice shift. I remember it from the Shelby Cobra that I drove not long ago, and it's so mechanical. The weight though is just perfect. It's quite a long throw. It's so satisfying to use.
But having said all that, you don't actually have to have 3 pedals to be faithful to the film cars.
Is it true some of them are actually automatics rather than...
There was only
manuals?
one automatic.
Okay.
And none of those are around. I think that car was one of the cars that didn't make it. But yeah, one of the cars during production was an automatic.
So if someone wants or needs the 10-speed auto option in one of these 25 continuation cars, then that's not going to be total heresy. Maybe that's what the man himself, Mr. Cage, would choose.
In your experience, have there been any particularly good actors in terms of the driving? Have there been any that you...
Actually, Nicolas Cage was a great driver.
Is he?
He was a good driver. We got him a car to practice with. Oddly enough, it was actually the gentleman that owned Total Control. I said, I need a car to practice with. I don't have anything built. So he had and I wanted Nick to get the feel of the rack and pinion steering and the coilover suspension. So he loaned us his car. It was a coupe, but it didn't make any difference. I think it was 65 or 6. It wasn't even a 7. But it didn't make any difference. So Nick Cage took it out to Willow Springs. Now, he's a great driver. He can handle a car great, but he's the roughest SOB in the world on clutches. I think we put 3 clutches in that car in 5 days, But, that's all well and good. But my understanding is I didn't see a lot of the filming because we were too busy working on the cars. But my understanding from everybody was that he was actually a pretty accomplished driver.
The drivers for the film were helped by the fact they didn't have to use the standard recirculating ball steering because Total Control Products, who Ray mentioned just then, did a rack and pinion conversion for the Eleanors on the film. And many of TCP's parts are on these cars too.
It's got power assisted steering, it turns in surprisingly well actually, and you feel like you can guide it down the road with a decent amount of accuracy. This comes with fully adjustable coilovers, and I suppose it shouldn't come as any surprise that this is a car that can be driven and driven hard, given that that's essentially what they do for a living. They make cars that need to be driven hard.
Stunt cars obviously are more about, a little bit about performance, although not necessarily if it's not a high-speed stunt, but it's mostly about handling.
Yeah.
You have to make sure it handles properly, you know, it's going to stay together. Stuntmen are notorious for wanting to break things. They want to break it. They will try to break it, you know, and they succeed. You know, so our job was to make them the safest possible car that they could do, you know, and challenge them to break it.
And sometimes they did.
So these are wheels?
Yes, so these are the wheels that came off of the jump car when they did the bridge jump. So we had both. This one was repaired, but this one right here is the one that got pancaked.
Original.
So cool. So this is the jump scene right at the very end. The bridge we're going
Yeah,
up
where he
over
jumps
the
and
top
bounces
and
off
the big
the
jump. What jump
Yeah.
is like
Big
the
jump.
one sort of.
So when they brought the car back, they took these off and they threw them away. And one of the guys at cinema was like, "Why are you throwing those away? So get those out." So he actually pulled them out of the trash, and he fixed one, and that was the one that did get fixed. But yeah, so one of the lucky buyers of the cars may end up with one of those as a coffee table or put a chain on it and use it as a necklace.
Because they didn't know at the time how many they would need of certain items, the company still has stock of various parts, like the pier lights and even an entire baller exhaust. Not that they all had one of those.
Well, for the actual movie cars, it was basically stopped right over the rear end. It was a cutout. The side exhaust was a piece of sheet metal backed and tech screwed into the rocker. That's what you see. If you look close at the actual movie, you're like, oh, wow. We even have, you know, the chrome edge tape for the doors. That's what's going around that piece of sheet metal, if you look at it close.
Yeah, it's
lipstick
on a pig most of the time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you build a hero car, a beauty car, like Ray said, where camera's going to be up close and on it, then everything has to be right. But if it's something going by at 40 miles an hour and you're not going to notice, then we could get away with some other stuff.
On the actual movie cars, it was actually plastic, very lightweight, able to attach and remove very quick. I mean, they're destroying cars every day. So the side scoops, the lower skirts, and the fender flares were actually plastic. We were pre-painting parts. So we put them on the car real quick, you know, and wreck it again, put a mirror on, let it hang, wreck it again.
So would you go to the filming and stuff?
No, they'd bring it at night, or they'd shoot nights, they'd bring it in the daytime, we'd work on it, perfect it, and they'd go back out and shoot it, wreck it again.
So this was claimed by car number 3 owner. He came down and went through everything, and that was his favorite hood, so that's being saved for him. We have different hoods up there in different stages.
Doors and fenders actually down here.
Those
There's
came
a
off
few
stunt cars.
Fender flares, actually even some old rack and pinion setups off the actual movie cars.
And there's
Front
a lot more
braces.
stuff in these crates that we got to go through. This is all stuff that's left over from the movie. But this is one of the doors from one of the scenes where the mirror gets knocked off the car and is hanging down. So this was...
It's just a scratch or something.
It's just a scratch. You can fix it.
It's just a scratch, Eleanor. It can be fixed.
What's next? What's after this? What do you do? What's the next kind of
So
one that you do?
we do have a
continuation
plan.
of? So
We do have a plan coming up. We're in talks right now. We can't say what it is because there's some negotiations, but it'll be another movie car, and that's what we're hoping is just to keep
that's
going
really
on
cool.
and do a movie. The one car I do want to do, it's not coming up too quick, but I do want to do a Ricky Bobby Chevelle.
Oh,
I mean, nobody really got. It didn't really get the notoriety it should have.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a bitchin' Chevelle. I loved it, and I thought that car should have got a little bit more popularity. And I think if we do like a nice LS Turbo Ricky Bobby Chevelles, I think those will go good. I do love Chevelles. Like I said, I love all muscle cars. I mean, this is my baby. This is my favorite, but I love all of them.
A bag of Lucky Charms taped to the underside of each one, presumably. Shake and indeed bake.
You drive around just wanting to say lines like, I am a bad man. For the next 24 hours, your decision-making rights have been revoked. You are the car is you.
Okay, on the basis that two Rogers don't make a right, I think that's enough quotes. But aside from a desire to do bad Nicolas Cage impressions, I think perhaps the only downside to owning one of these Eleanors would be that you'd instinctively worry every time you left it alone for more than 60 seconds. Would it still be there when you got back? You'd certainly want some decent insurance.